He agreed to one dinner, one evening, one harmless lie. But the moment Victoria Ashcroft laced her fingers through his and looked her mother dead in the eye and said, "Mom, I want you to meet Logan, my boyfriend." Logan Mercer understood with absolute clarity that nothing about this night was going to be harmless. He was a widower, a single father, her roommate, her best friend, and now apparently the boyfriend of one of the most powerful women in the city, standing in her family's dining room with a glass of wine he hadn't touched, smiling at people he'd never met, pretending to be in love with a woman he was terrified to admit he already was. If you've ever done something for someone you cared about and felt the ground shift under your feet, this story is for you. Hit that like button, drop your city in the comments, and let's see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. The morning it started, Logan burned the eggs. That in itself wasn't unusual. He burned things with a kind of quiet regularity that had become part of the apartment's rhythm. The faint smell of scorched butter, the smoke detector chirping once before he waved it into silence with a dish towel, his daughter Maisie announcing from the hallway without even looking up from her book, "You burned them again, Daddy." "I didn't burn them," Logan said. "I caramelized them." "That's not what caramelized means." "How do you know? You're 7. I'm almost 8. Almost 8 isn't 8. Maisie appeared in the kitchen doorway in her school uniform, her dark hair already escaping the 2 braids Logan had attempted that morning. One tight, one already half undone, because he'd run out of patience halfway through and she'd started wiggling. She looked at the pan. She looked at Logan. She had her mother's eyes, that particular shade of warm brown that caught light in a way that still, after 4 years, could stop him mid-thought. "Caramelize means golden," Maisie said. "Those are black." "Okay," Logan said. "I burned them." He scraped the eggs into the trash without ceremony, cracked 2 more, turned the heat down, and started over. Maisie climbed onto the counter stool and opened her book again, and for a few minutes the apartment was quiet except for the hiss of the pan and the distant sound of morning traffic 18 floors below. It was a good apartment. Logan hadn't chosen it, had stumbled into it 3 years ago when a colleague mentioned that Victoria Ashcroft was looking for a roommate because her previous one had taken a job in Seattle and she hadn't gotten around to finding someone new, and she was, apparently, spectacularly bad at living alone. The colleague had framed it carefully. She's particular. She works insane hours. She needs someone steady, someone who won't be weird about her schedule. Logan had been coming out of the worst 2 years of his life. He'd needed affordable rent, a second bedroom for Maisie, and though he wouldn't have said it out loud at the time, something that felt like stability. He'd met Victoria for coffee. They'd talked for 2 hours about everything except the apartment, and by the time they left, she'd handed him a key and said, "Don't rearrange my bookshelf and we'll be fine." He hadn't rearranged her bookshelf. They had been, by almost any measure, fine, and then considerably better than fine, and then something that didn't have a clean word attached to it. Somewhere between the first month and the third, they'd learned each other's schedules without trying. She knew he needed the kitchen between 7 and 7:45 every morning, or the whole day went sideways. He knew she ate dinner at her desk on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that leaving a plate outside her office door was more useful than asking if she was hungry. She'd started watching the architectural review programs he left on and asking questions she actually wanted answered. He'd started understanding the shorthand she used when she was running 3 meetings in her head simultaneously and didn't have bandwidth for full sentences. They'd built something that worked, something neither of them had planned, and both of them, he suspected, were quietly grateful for. He slid the second batch of eggs onto Maisie's plate just as Victoria's bedroom door opened. She was already dressed, charcoal blazer, hair pinned up, the particular expression she wore when she'd been awake since 5 and had already done more before breakfast than most people did before noon. She came into the kitchen and went directly to the coffee maker without speaking, which was standard. Victoria did not do mornings. She did efficiency, and mornings were merely the first obstacle between her and the rest of the day. "There's eggs," Logan offered. "Coffee first." "There's toast too." "Logan, coffee, got it." She poured her cup, wrapped both hands around it, and stood at the counter staring at the middle distance for approximately 30 seconds. Then something shifted in her face. Something tightened, and Logan, who had become reasonably fluent in Victoria's expressions over 3 years, recognized the particular look that meant something was bothering her, and she hadn't decided yet whether to say it. He didn't push. He'd learned that too. Maisie finished her eggs, slid off the stool, kissed Logan on the cheek, and disappeared back down the hallway to finish getting ready. The apartment settled into the kind of quiet that meant it was just the two of them for a few minutes. "My mother called last night," Victoria said. Logan poured his own coffee. "How'd that go?" It wasn't really a question. He knew how calls with Eleanor Ashcroft went. He'd heard enough of them. Victoria's voice shifting into a register that was controlled and careful, and nothing like the voice she used the rest of the time, to have a fairly complete picture. "She's hosting dinner on Saturday." Victoria set her cup down. "At the house." "Okay. Marcus will be there?" Logan looked up. Marcus Hale was Victoria's ex-boyfriend. Logan knew the basic outlines. They'd dated for 2 years. The relationship had ended 18 months ago. It had not ended cleanly. He also knew, because Victoria had told him in the flat, matter-of-fact way she told him things she'd already processed and filed away, that Eleanor Ashcroft had never entirely accepted that it was over. Marcus came from the kind of family that Eleanor found reassuring. He wore the right suits and said the right things, and had a career that looked, from a certain angle, like everything a mother might want for her daughter. Victoria found him exhausting. She'd said so exactly once, and the way she'd said it, not with anger, just with a tired, quiet certainty, had told Logan more about that relationship than anything else. "She's setting it up," Victoria said. "I know she is. She'll frame it as a family dinner, and then Marcus will be there, and she'll spend the entire evening engineering opportunities for us to reconnect." She picked up her coffee again. "I'd rather not go." "Then don't go." "I can't not go. My father's birthday is next weekend, and if I skip Saturday's dinner, she'll hold it over me for the next 6 months." She looked at him with the expression she used when she'd already thought through all the variables and hadn't liked any of them. "I've been trying to think of a way to make it less of an ambush." Logan waited. "I was thinking," she said, and then she stopped, which was unusual. Victoria didn't usually stop mid-sentence. "Never mind." "You were thinking what?" "It's a big ask." "Victoria," she looked at her coffee cup, "I was thinking that if I showed up with someone, if it looked like I was already with someone, that it would change the whole dynamic. My mother couldn't spend the evening pushing Marcus at me if I'd brought my own person, and Marcus couldn't do his thing where he acts like we're inevitably going to find our way back to each other." Logan was quiet for a moment. "Your own person," he said. "Someone she'd have to take seriously. Someone who seems like—" She stopped again, and he watched her weigh the next words carefully. "Like the real thing." The kitchen was very still. "You want me to come to dinner?" Logan said. "I want you to come to dinner as my boyfriend." She looked up then, and her expression was completely direct, which was the most Victoria thing about her. The way she could say the most significant thing with perfect calm, like she was discussing a scheduling adjustment. "You don't have to. It's a genuinely terrible thing to ask. I know that." Logan thought about it for all of 5 seconds. "What time?" Victoria blinked. 7? "But Logan, I mean it. You absolutely don't have to. What do I wear?" "You—" She paused. "It's a formal dinner, your dark blue jacket." "I burned the eggs," he said, turning back to the stove. "But I'll be ready by 6:30. He thought about it on the train to work. He was careful, the way he was always careful about Victoria, not to think about it too directly, not to examine the thing underneath the yes, the thing that had answered before his brain finished processing the question. He was good at that. He'd had practice. Logan's office was on the 14th floor of a building in the financial district, a mid-sized architecture firm where he'd worked for 6 years and risen to senior associate through the specific combination of talent and relentless focus that had been the only survival strategy available to him after Julia died. Work had been the scaffolding. He'd built his way back to functioning by having somewhere to be and something that required his full attention. And even now, 4 years later, work was still the place he went when everything else felt like too much. He had a good reputation. Clients liked him because he listened, really listened, in a way that wasn't common. His designs had a quality people sometimes struggled to name, something warm underneath the clean lines, something that suggested the space had been made for actual human beings, who would eat and fight and make up and put their kids to bed inside it. His colleague Rafe noticed something was off before the morning meeting. "You've got the face," Rafe said, dropping into the chair across from Logan's desk. "I don't have a face. The one where you're trying not to think about something by thinking very hard about something else." Rafe propped his feet on the edge of the desk. "What happened?" "Victoria asked me to be her fake boyfriend at her family dinner Saturday." Rafe's feet came off the desk. "I'm sorry?" Logan explained. Rafe listened with the focused intensity he usually reserved for contract disputes, and when Logan finished, Rafe sat back and said, "And you said yes. She needed help." "Logan, it's one dinner." "You've been in love with that woman for at least a year and a half," Rafe said, "and you just agreed to spend an entire evening pretending to be her boyfriend. Do you see any possible complications here?" "I'm not," Logan started, and then didn't finish because Rafe's expression was doing something that made finishing seem pointless. "You leave coffee outside her door," Rafe said. "You learned how she takes it. You know which of her work clothes she hates, and which one she actually feels good in because she told you once and you filed it somewhere. You stayed home last New Year's Eve because she had a migraine and you didn't want her to be alone." He paused. "You want to tell me you're not in love with her?" "I'm telling you it's complicated." "What's complicated about it?" Logan looked at his drafting table. "She's my roommate. She's been my roommate for 3 years. Whatever is there, it works because we've never touched it. The whole thing works because of the line. And now you're going to spend an evening pretending the line doesn't exist. To help her." Rafe was quiet for a moment. "Okay," he said finally. "I just want you to know what you're walking into." "I know what I'm walking into." He didn't, entirely. But he went. Cut. Saturday arrived the way formal family obligations always do, preceded by a kind of dull anxiety that makes the actual event, whatever it turns out to be, almost a relief. Logan had ironed his shirt twice. He'd changed his tie and then changed it back. Maisie, who was spending the night at her friend Sophie's house, had asked him why he was nervous, and he'd said he wasn't nervous, and she'd looked at him with the expression that meant she was absolutely going to be a difficult teenager. He was standing in the living room at 6:28 when Victoria came out. She was wearing a deep green dress he hadn't seen before, so fitted at the waist, simple, nothing that was trying too hard, and her hair was down, which she almost never did on purpose, and she had the posture she used when she was walking into something she intended to win. She looked. He didn't let himself finish the thought completely. He put it somewhere else. "You look good," he said. "Don't be nice to me right now," she said. "I'm trying to be efficient about this." "Okay. You look adequately prepared." She almost smiled. "Better." She picked up her bag. "My mother is going to ask you questions. She's not subtle about it. She'll ask how we met, when things changed, what your plans are. We met when you needed a roommate. Things changed," he thought. 6 months ago? That works." She looked at him sideways. "You don't have to remember every detail. Just be yourself. You're better in rooms than you think you are." "I'm terrible in rooms." "You're warm," she said, and said it simply, like it was a plain fact. "People feel that. It's useful." She reached out and straightened his collar, a brisk, practical gesture that lasted about 2 seconds, and that he didn't think about at all. "Ready? Let's go," he said. The Ashcroft house was 40 minutes north of the city, a property that announced itself gradually, the houses getting larger and the trees getting older, until the car turned onto a long gravel drive and the main house appeared at the end of it. It was impressive without being ostentatious. The architecture that old money favored, the kind designed to say we don't need to try. Victoria had gone quiet for the last 10 minutes of the drive. Logan didn't fill the silence. He drove, and he let her have the quiet, and somewhere around the last turn he felt her exhale, slow and deliberate, the kind that's really an act of will. "It'll be fine," he said. "You don't know that." "No," he agreed, "but I'll be there." She looked at him, and for a fraction of a second, something crossed her face that he didn't have a category for. Then she turned back to the window as he pulled up to the house. They walked up the front steps, and Logan became aware with the particular clarity that arrives right before something difficult, that whatever version of himself he'd been maintaining at a careful distance for 3 years was about to spend an entire evening standing very close to the thing he'd been keeping at that distance. He was aware of the space between them, 3 inches, maybe 4. He was aware of the sound of the door being answered and the warm light from inside and Eleanor Ashcroft's voice saying, "Victoria, darling." And then Victoria's hand found his, not tentatively, not like a question. Her fingers slid between his with the easy certainty of someone who'd done it 1,000 times, and she stepped through the door and said, "Mom, this is Logan, my boyfriend." Every head in the entry hall turned. Logan smiled. It was a real smile, because the alternative was worse, and because whatever else was happening inside his chest right now, he was here for her, and that was still true. "It's wonderful to meet you," he said to Eleanor Ashcroft, and shook her hand with the hand that wasn't holding Victoria's. Eleanor was elegant in the particular way of women who had always expected to be looked at, not cold exactly, but assessing. She looked at Logan the way someone looks at a piece of work they're deciding whether to like. Then she looked at Victoria, and something complicated moved through her expression. "Well," Eleanor said, "this is a surprise." "I know," Victoria said pleasantly. "I should have mentioned it sooner." They were ushered in. The house was full of the particular warmth of spaces designed for formal gatherings. Good furniture, fresh flowers, the smell of something cooking that cost a great deal of care. Logan counted 7 other people. Victoria's father, Richard, was across the room, a tall man with gray at his temples, who moved toward them immediately and shook Logan's hand with what seemed like genuine interest. There were aunts, a cousin, a family friend, and Marcus Hale was standing by the fireplace. Logan registered him with the quiet attentiveness he brought to most things. 40, probably. Well-built in the way of men who exercise as a function of their competitive nature. Wearing a suit that cost more than Logan's rent in the easy, unconscious way of men who have never calculated that kind of thing. He was handsome. He was also looking at Victoria with an expression that Logan didn't like. Not obvious, not crude, just a particular kind of patience, like a man who believed outcomes were inevitable. Marcus's eyes moved to their joined hands and stayed there for a moment. "Victoria," he said, "you look incredible." "Marcus," Victoria's voice was perfectly balanced. "You remember my—" And here she did something subtle, a tiny pause that wasn't quite hesitation. "Logan." "We haven't met," Logan said, and extended his free hand. Marcus shook it. "No, we haven't." His grip was firm in the deliberate way. "Logan, are you in business?" "Architecture," Logan said. "Interesting," said in a tone that suggested he found it the opposite. "It has its moments," Logan said, with complete pleasantness. Dinner was served at a long table with more candles than strictly necessary, and a centerpiece that blocked direct eye contact with half the people across from you, which Logan suspected had been chosen by Eleanor specifically because it disrupted conversation into smaller, more manageable channels she could monitor. He was seated next to Victoria. That much Eleanor had apparently conceded. What followed was one of the stranger evenings of Logan's recent life, and his recent life had included a surprising number of strange evenings. The performance of it should have been exhausting. 2 people who were roommates and friends and nothing more, playing the role of people who were something more. But it wasn't exhausting. That was the part Logan hadn't anticipated. It was easy. Not effortless in the way that things are effortless when they're false, in the way that things are easy when they're already almost true. Victoria passed him the bread before he reached for it, because she knew he always wanted bread. He topped off her water glass without being asked, because he always did that at home, and didn't think about it until he was already doing it. When Richard asked how they'd known each other before they got together, Logan said, "She needed a roommate, and I needed to get out of my own head." And Victoria added, "He burned breakfast 3 times the first week, and I thought I'd made a terrible mistake." And both of these things were factually accurate. And Richard laughed, and Logan felt the strange vertigo of a lie constructed entirely from true things. Marcus tried twice. The first time was a question about Logan's career that was structured as a compliment, but landed as a diminishment. Something about how it must be satisfying to work on a smaller scale, more human, after Victoria's world of global strategy. Logan simply agreed that yes, he preferred working on things people actually lived in and left the rest of it alone. The second time was more direct. They were between courses, and Marcus had apparently decided that subtlety wasn't getting him where he wanted to go. "Victoria," he said from across the table, in a tone that carried even through the candles and the centerpiece. "I was talking with Stephen Harwick last week. He mentioned the Meridian Group partnership. Sounds like a substantial opportunity." Victoria set her fork down with care. He seemed to think you'd be seriously considering it." "Stephen Harwick thinks a lot of things," Victoria said. "The global expansion alone," Marcus leaned forward slightly. "That's the kind of thing that demands a different kind of life, a different kind of commitment." His eyes moved briefly to Logan. "Certain flexibility." The implication sat in the air. Logan felt Victoria's hand find his knee under the table, not anxious, grounding, like she was using the contact to stay even. "Marcus," Richard said from the head of the table, with a mildness that was clearly a warning, "I think we agreed this wasn't the night for business." "Of course," Marcus said, and smiled and leaned back. Logan turned to Victoria and said, quietly enough that it wasn't a performance, "Tell me about the Meridian thing later, if you want." She looked at him. Not for the cameras, not for her mother, just looked at him. "Okay," she said. After dinner, while Eleanor organized the movement of guests toward the sitting room with the efficiency of a military commander, Richard caught Logan near the hallway. "Walk with me for a minute," Richard said, with the particular courtesy of men who are actually asking a question. They stepped into a study off the main hall. Books on 3 walls, a desk with actual papers on it, a pair of leather chairs. Richard poured 2 small glasses of scotch, handed one to Logan, and didn't say anything for a moment. "How long have you known her?" he said finally. 3 years, Logan said. "As a friend, most of that." "As a friend," Richard repeated. "And now?" Logan thought about the honest answer. "Now, I'm still figuring out which is which." Richard looked at him for a long moment. He had the same quality of stillness Victoria had, the capacity to be in a room without filling it with noise. "She doesn't bring people here," he said. "I want you to understand what that means, not because I'm setting conditions, just because you should know." "I know," Logan said, and he did. Richard nodded, as if something had been confirmed. "She works too hard," he said. "She always has. I don't know if that's something I gave her or something she came with." He turned his glass slowly in his hands. "She's earned everything she has. I hope she has someone around who reminds her of that occasionally." "I try," Logan said. Richard smiled, and it was Victoria's smile, the real one, the one she didn't use in business settings. "Good," he said. "Let's go back in." They left just after 10. The drive back was quiet in a different way from the drive out. Quieter, like something had been released into the air of the car and was settling. "Your father's good," Logan said. "He is," Victoria said. "He's always been the good one." She was looking out the passenger window. "Marcus is going to tell people about tonight. Let him. He'll frame it as Victoria." Logan glanced at her. "Let him." She was quiet. "Your mother liked you," she said after a minute. "You were fine." She asked me 3 different versions of the same question, whether this was serious. I gave her 3 different versions of the same answer. "What was the answer?" She looked at him for a beat. "I said yes." Logan kept his eyes on the road. "Thank you," Victoria said. "For tonight. You were—" She stopped. "You didn't have to do what you did with Marcus when he was being a lot." "Yes. I didn't do anything." "You stayed calm," she said. "You just stayed calm, and it made it smaller. You're good at that." She turned back to the window. "I forget sometimes how good you are at that." They drove the rest of the way home through the dark, and Logan thought about lines, and about all the ways that lines, once you've spent an evening on the wrong side of them without disaster, start to seem less like protection and more like something you drew on a map a long time ago and kept following out of habit. He didn't say any of that. He parked. They rode the elevator up. He held the door open and she walked through it ahead of him and paused in the apartment hallway, bag still over her shoulder, something on her face that he couldn't quite read. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked, which was what she always said. Which meant, "Are we okay? Is this normal? Is everything still what it was?" "Same time," he said. She nodded and went to her room, and Logan stood in the hallway for a moment, in the quiet apartment that smelled like coffee, and Maisie's crayons, and the particular version of home that had grown up around the three of them without anyone planning it. He'd agreed to one dinner. He was already pretty sure it wasn't going to stay one dinner. Sunday started the way Sundays usually did. Maisie home by 9, dragging a backpack that was somehow heavier than when she'd left, full of the particular energy of a child who had stayed up 2 hours past her bedtime at a friend's house and was now running entirely on the kind of stubborn momentum that precedes a full collapse. She ate cereal, refused to admit she was tired, read half a page of her book with her eyes visibly drooping, and was asleep on the couch by 10:15. Logan covered her with the blanket from the armchair and stood there for a second, just looking at her. This was something he did and never talked about. This specific thing of stopping to look at her when she was asleep, like he needed to confirm that she was still real, still here, still his. It had started after Julia died, when the fear of losing things had moved in and rearranged everything. He was better about it now. Mostly. He left Maisie on the couch and went to make coffee. Victoria was in the kitchen already, standing at the counter with her laptop open and her reading glasses on, which meant she'd been up long enough to have made a plan for the day and was already executing it. She had a habit of working Sunday mornings that Logan had long since stopped commenting on. She worked because she wanted to, not because she had to, and there was a difference that most people who didn't know her well got wrong. She looked up when he came in. "She's asleep," he said. "I heard her come in." Victoria took her glasses off. "How'd she sleep at Sophie's?" "Poorly, from the look of her." He started the coffee. "You eat?" "I had toast." "Real toast or one piece of toast that you ate standing over the sink in 30 seconds. Victoria looked back at her laptop. It was nutritionally equivalent. He made eggs. He made them correctly this time. Low heat, moving them slowly, the way Maisie had been requesting since she'd watched a cooking video 6 months ago and become briefly, intensely opinionated about eggs. He put a plate next to Victoria's laptop without asking. She ate without looking up from the screen, which was the only thank you he expected. They'd done this 1,000 times. That was the thing he kept returning to, in the quiet part of his mind that he tried not to give too much airtime. How much of Saturday night had looked like pretending, and how much of it had just been this, the thing they already did, translated into a different room with different furniture. "She asked me 4 questions, Victoria said, without looking up. "Your mother." "While you were with my father." She turned a page in whatever she was reading. "How long we'd been together, whether I'd introduced you to people at work, whether Maisie called me anything." Logan was quiet for a beat. "What'd you say to that one?" "I said we were taking it slowly, that it was a new situation for everyone." She paused. She didn't push it, which means she's thinking about it. "Is that a problem?" "It means she's building a position." Victoria finally looked up. "My mother doesn't ask questions because she's curious. She asks questions because she's collecting information she intends to use." "For what?" "I don't know yet." She closed the laptop. "Logan, I want to say something and I need you to not be nice about it." He leaned against the counter. "Okay. Last night it worked. Better than I expected, and I know you did that because you're a decent person, and I asked you to, but I'm aware of what I asked." She held his gaze. "I put you in a position that wasn't fair, and I want to make sure things aren't strange." "Are they strange for you?" he asked. She thought about it genuinely, which was one of the things about Victoria that he'd always found both admirable and sometimes inconvenient. She didn't answer questions until she'd actually considered them. "A little," she said. "Not bad strange, just—" She gestured, which was unlike her. Victoria rarely gestured when she couldn't find words. "Unfamiliar." "Unfamiliar isn't bad." "No," she agreed. "It's just unfamiliar." She picked up her coffee. "Thank you for what you did with Marcus. You didn't have to stay even when he was being—" Marcus is the kind of guy who needs someone to stay calm at him, Logan said. It's fine. You're very calm. I'm not particularly calm. I just don't show it. She looked at him over her cup, and he had the feeling, as he occasionally did with Victoria, that she was reading something he hadn't meant to put on the page. Then Maisie's voice came from the living room. Not words, just the particular groggy sound of a child waking up and establishing that the world still existed. And the moment passed. "Maisie," Logan called, "don't fall off the couch." "I wasn't going to fall off the couch," Maisie said, with the dignity of someone who had probably been about to fall off the couch. The week after the dinner had a particular texture that Logan noticed but tried not to examine too carefully. Nothing had changed, technically. He still drove Maisie to school. Victoria still left before he did and came home later. He still had drafts to review and client calls to take, and the project he'd been working on for 7 months, a community arts center in the east part of the city, his favorite thing on his desk, was entering the phase that required the most sustained attention and offered the most specific satisfaction. But there were small things. Victoria texted him Tuesday afternoon. "Marcus emailed me. Wanted to check in." Logan typed back, "What are you going to do?" Nothing. Ignoring it. Then a few seconds later, "Is that wrong?" "No," he wrote. "That's exactly right." She sent a single punctuation mark in response, a period, which with Victoria meant good, that settles it. And that was the end of it. Wednesday, she came home at 7, which was early for her on a Wednesday. Maisie was at the kitchen table doing homework with the concentration of someone who would rather be doing anything else, and Victoria stopped in the doorway, and Logan looked up from where he was working on a section of drawings, and Victoria said, "I had a meeting cancel. Don't make a thing of it." "I wasn't going to make a thing of it." "You were about to smile." "That's just my face." Maisie looked up from her homework. "Victoria, can you help me with fractions? Daddy does them wrong." "I don't do them wrong," Logan said. "I do them the long way." "He draws pictures," Maisie told Victoria confidentially, "like diagrams. It takes forever." Victoria put her bag down, took off her jacket, hung it on the hook by the door with the automatic precision of someone who had lived in the apartment long enough for its habits to become her habits, and sat down at the table next to Maisie. "Show me what you have," she said. Logan watched them for a moment. Maisie pulling her worksheet across the table, Victoria reading it with the same focused attention she brought to quarterly reports, and went back to his drawings. This was also not new. Victoria had been doing homework with Maisie since about 6 months into her tenancy, initially because Maisie had simply started asking her, with the disarming directness of young children, for help with things Logan hadn't known she was struggling with. Victoria had obliged, matter-of-factly, without making a production of it. Logan had watched this arrangement develop with a feeling he hadn't tried to name. 3/8, Victoria said. "Think of it like slices. You have 8 slices. You take 3. But why do they have to have the same bottom number to add them? Because you can't add slices that are different sizes. If I give you a piece from an 8-slice pizza and a piece from a 4-slice pizza, they're not the same size, are they?" Maisie considered this seriously. The 4-slice one would be bigger. Exactly. So before you can add them, you have to cut them to match. There was a pause. "Oh," Maisie said. "Daddy, did you know that?" "I did," Logan said. "I just use diagrams." "Diagrams," Maisie repeated with the mild contempt of the newly enlightened. Thursday, Rafe stopped by Logan's desk in the late afternoon with the expression of a man who had something to say and had decided to say it sideways. "How was the dinner?" he said. "Fine." "Fine like actually fine, or fine like you're not ready to talk about it?" "Fine like we went. It went okay, we came home." Logan kept his eyes on the drawing he was working on. "Her father's a good man. Her mother is strategic. Her ex is the kind of guy who thinks patience is the same thing as inevitability. And Victoria?" "Was Victoria." Rafe sat on the edge of the desk. "Logan." "Rafe, I'm asking as your friend." Logan set his pencil down. "It was strange. It was also not as strange as it should have been, which is the part I'm not sure what to do with." Rafe nodded slowly. "Have you talked to her? Since?" "We live together. We talk constantly." About this. We talked Sunday. She wanted to make sure things weren't weird. Are they weird? Logan thought about Victoria at the kitchen table with Maisie and fractions, and about the way her hand had found his in the doorway of her parents' house like it already knew the way. They're always a little weird, he said. That's not new. Rafe looked at him for a long moment. At some point, he said, you're going to have to decide if the line is something you want to maintain or something you're just afraid to cross. Those are different reasons. Logan didn't answer. Rafe picked up a pen from the desk, looked at it, put it back, and went back to his own office. Logan sat with that for longer than he intended to. The second dinner was Eleanor's idea. She called Victoria on Friday afternoon. Logan could hear it from the living room, the careful, modulated quality of Victoria's voice that meant she was managing a conversation she hadn't chosen. He didn't try to listen, but he caught enough. His name. A Sunday. Mother, it's very short notice. A pause. Fine. She came out of her room looking like someone who had agreed to something and wasn't happy about it. She wants to do lunch Sunday, Victoria said. At the house. Just immediate family. She paused. She specifically asked if you and Maisie could come. Logan looked up from the plans he was reviewing. Maisie? She said she'd love to meet her. Victoria's expression was neutral in the careful way. I told her I'd ask. Logan, I don't want to make this a bigger thing than it already is. If she'd love to meet her, Logan said, why would we say no? Oh, because Maisie is 7 years old and doesn't know she's part of a... Victoria stopped. This started as one favor. I'm aware of how far it's expanded. Do you want to go? She leaned against the doorframe. I want my mother to let this Marcus thing go. I want her to accept that I'm living my life the way I've chosen to live it. She looked at him. Right now, this is working. Then we go Sunday. Maisie doesn't know any of this, Victoria said. She'll just be herself. Is that okay? Maisie being herself is the most okay thing I can think of, Logan said. Victoria made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but was in that direction. Your confidence in her is very touching. She handled fractions this week. She can handle lunch. Sunday at the Ashcroft house was different in the particular way that daytime is different from evening. The formality dialed down, the light honest and clear, fewer places to hide. Eleanor met them at the door with a warmth that Logan assessed carefully and decided was partly genuine and partly strategy, and probably, at this point in Eleanor Ashcroft's life, inseparable from each other. Maisie shook Eleanor's hand with the seriousness she brought to new adults and said, Your house is very big. Is it old? It is, Eleanor said, visibly surprised. About 90 years. Our school is 63 years old, Maisie said, but it got a new roof. Did it? It was a whole thing, Maisie said, in the tone of someone who had heard a lot about the roof situation. There was a meeting. Eleanor looked at Logan with an expression he hadn't expected, genuine amusement. She's wonderful, she said, which was also partly strategy and probably also, in this particular moment, true. Lunch was easier. Richard showed Maisie the garden while the adults settled on the back terrace, and they could hear occasional bursts of Maisie's commentary floating over the hedgerow. Something about a particular flower, something about whether bees had feelings, and it lightened something in the atmosphere that a Sunday lunch with Eleanor Ashcroft might otherwise have maintained. She's very confident, Eleanor said. Is she like her mother? The question was delicately pointed. Logan had known it would come. She's her own person, he said. But there are things, yeah. Logan's wife passed 4 years ago, Victoria said, without drama. Just as information. Car accident. Eleanor's expression shifted. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it. Thank you, Logan said. There was a short silence that wasn't uncomfortable. Then Eleanor said, How do the two of you manage it with your schedules? Like anyone does, Victoria said. Badly, sometimes. Better than that, other times. She's being modest, Logan said. She's more organized than I am. He cooks, Victoria said, which balances out the organizational gap significantly. I burned eggs twice this week, Logan said. 3 times, Victoria said. I didn't say anything about Tuesday. You weren't home Tuesday. I could smell it from down the hall. Richard returned from the garden with Maisie, who had apparently made definitive assessments about the relative merits of the various flowers and was ready to share them with the table in ranked order. The conversation moved and branched and did the thing that lunch conversations do when the people around the table are, despite their complications, mostly trying. At some point, Eleanor touched Logan's arm, briefly, and said, quietly enough that it was clearly intended just for him, "She seems lighter than she has in a while." She paused. "I don't always get it right with her. I want you to know I know that." Well, Logan didn't have a perfect answer for that. He said, "She's doing well. I think she's really doing well." Eleanor nodded, and that was enough. And on the drive home, Maisie fell asleep in the back seat with her head tipped against the window, one shoe off because she'd been working at it for the last 20 minutes without fully committing. The radio was low. The late afternoon light was coming in at a low angle that made everything look a little warmer than it was. "She told me," Victoria said, "that the rose bushes were planted in the wrong order." Maisie did. "She told my mother that the red ones should be closer to the house because they're more dramatic and drama belongs near the main event." Victoria looked out the window. "My mother did not take offense." "Maisie has that effect." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "She's easy to love," she said, and it came out without apparent deliberation, flat and honest and with the quality of something that had been true for a while. She didn't look at Logan when she said it. She kept looking out the window. Logan didn't say anything. He watched the road. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said. "Yeah." "Did you mean it, what you said to my mother, that I'm doing well?" He thought about the careful answer and decided against it. "Yeah," he said. "I think you're doing better than you give yourself credit for, and I think you know that. And I think the part that's hard is that it's easier to be busy than to notice it." She didn't respond immediately. "That's annoyingly accurate," she said finally. "I've been studying." "Studying what?" "The subject," he said. The silence that followed was different from the silences before. It had more in it. It had the quality of two people sitting with something they'd both just caught a glimpse of and weren't ready to name yet, and weren't fleeing from either, just sitting with it, the way you sit with something real. Maisie made a small sound in the back seat and resettled without waking. Logan drove. The city came back up around them, the buildings gathering at the edges of the highway, the light changing as the afternoon started its tilt toward evening. By the time they reached the apartment building, the streetlights were just beginning to consider coming on. He parked. He carried Maisie up. She barely woke, mumbled something about roses. Let him put her to bed. When he came back out to the living room, Victoria was still in the kitchen, not working, not doing anything purposeful, just standing with a glass of water and looking out the window at the city below. He stood in the doorway. "You know what's strange?" she said, not turning around. "What?" "I've been to that house 100 times. Since I moved out at 22, I've been back probably, I don't know, hundreds of times. Dinners, holidays, meetings. My mother calls family occasions and are actually corporate planning sessions for the Ashcroft family brand." She paused. Today felt different. "Different how?" She turned then. "Like something I could actually be in." She looked at him steadily. "I don't know if that's because of the situation or because of—" She stopped. "Because of what?" he said, knowing. She shook her head, not unwilling to answer, just not ready. There was a difference, and he knew the difference. "It's late," she said, though it wasn't particularly late. "Yeah," he said. "Thank you for Sunday. Again." "You don't have to keep thanking me." "I know." She moved past him toward the hallway and stopped for a second, close enough that he was aware of the specific quality of the silence. "Logan." "Yeah." She seemed to consider something, then abandon it. "Never mind," she said. "Good night." "Good night, Victoria." She went to her room. Logan stood in the living room in the dark for a moment, in the particular quiet of a Sunday night when everyone is home and everything is still, and thought about the space between people. How it can be measured in inches and mean nothing, or mean everything, depending entirely on what fills it. He went to his room. He didn't sleep for a while. The thing about performing a version of your life is that it requires you to watch yourself from the outside. Logan had been doing that, in one way or another, since the Saturday of the first dinner, a quiet background awareness of how he moved through the apartment, what he said, what he didn't say, what he allowed himself to notice, and what he filed somewhere darker and less examined. He was good at it. He'd had practice. But 2 weeks after the Sunday lunch, something shifted. Not dramatically. Not the way things shift in movies, with weather and music and someone saying the exact right-wrong thing at the exact right-wrong moment. It was smaller than that. It was a Tuesday night at 9:45 when Victoria came out of her office looking like she'd lost something she hadn't known she was holding on to and sat down on the couch without turning the television on and just sat there. Logan looked up from the kitchen table where he'd been working on a material specification for the Arts Center. "You eat?" he asked. "No." He got up without making a thing of it, reheated the pasta he'd made for dinner, brought it to her with a fork, and sat back down at the table. Victoria ate slowly, staring at the middle distance. He didn't ask. He'd learned the particular geography of her silences, which ones wanted company, and which ones wanted witness without interrogation. This one wanted witness. After about 10 minutes, she said, "They made an offer." "The Meridian Group?" "Through channels, not officially. Someone called Stephen Harwick, who called my CFO, who called me." She set the bowl on the coffee table. "The number it's significant, the kind of number that makes you sit down." Logan leaned back in his chair. "What does the deal actually require?" "Relocation, New York, initially, then London within 18 months. She looked at the wall. "New structure, new board composition. I would have equity, but not control. The company would still have my name on it for a transition period, and then—" She made a small gesture that finished the sentence without finishing it. "And then it's theirs," Logan said. "Essentially. Is that what you want?" She turned to look at him, and the expression on her face was the one she only had when she was being entirely honest about something that cost her something. "I don't know," she said. "I built this company from nothing. From a converted bedroom and one client who paid late and a business plan, I rewrote 11 times." She paused. "Walking away from control isn't— I can't just think of it as a transaction." "Then don't." "That's not how business works." "I know how business works," Logan said. "I'm asking what you want. Not what makes strategic sense. Not what your board is going to say. What you want." She was quiet for a long moment. "I want to still be able to walk into my own company and have it feel like mine," she said. "I want that to still be true in 5 years." She picked up her fork and put it back down without using it. Marcus called again. The shift in topic was abrupt. Logan registered it. "He called my direct line," she said. "Not email. My direct line, which he only has because we dated, and which is not listed anywhere." She said it flatly. "He said he'd heard about the Meridian situation through Harwick. He said he thought I should take it, that it was a natural progression, that sometimes the things we build need to move beyond us to reach their potential." She paused. "That's a direct quote." "That's condescending," Logan said. "It's a lot of things." Victoria looked at him. "He also said that he hoped things were going well with— He used your name. He knew your name. He said he hoped things were going well with Logan." Logan didn't say anything. "He was making a point," Victoria said, "that he knows things, that he's still paying attention." She shook her head. "I don't want to talk about Marcus. I needed to say it to someone before I decided what to do with it." "What are you going to do with it?" "Nothing," she said. "Ignore it and move forward." She looked at him. "Do you think that's the right call?" "I think Marcus is a man who conflates attention with influence," Logan said. "Ignoring him is the right call." She nodded, reached for her water glass, looked at him again in the quiet, direct way she had that he was still, 2.5 weeks into whatever this was, not entirely accustomed to. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You're going to either way. When Julia died—" She stopped. "Is that okay to ask about?" "Yeah." "When she died. The thing that was hardest, was it the grief, or was it not knowing who you were without it?" It was a more precise question than most people asked. He thought about it seriously, which was the only way to respond to it. "Both," he said, and they felt the same for a while. The grief and the loss of shape. Who I was when she was alive and who I was after weren't the same person, and for a long time I didn't know if the second person was worth being. But you figured it out. I'm still figuring it out. He looked at her steadily. Why are you asking? She looked at her hands. Because I think I've been doing the same thing with the company. Not grief, but the shape of it. The thing I built has started to feel like the only version of me that exists. And when someone comes along and says, your thing should be something else, something bigger, something beyond you, I can't tell if the resistance is vision or fear. It might be both, Logan said. Both can be true. That's not a particularly useful answer. No, he agreed, but it's an honest one. She looked at him for a beat, and he saw something in her expression that he'd seen pieces of before but not assembled quite this way. Something that was almost relief. The specific relief of being given honesty instead of management. You're not easy to talk to, she said, and he heard what she meant, which was the opposite. The week before Eleanor's formal dinner, the large one, the one she'd been planning since the first Saturday, the one that Logan had been told now included 12 people and would require a dress code, Maisie got sick. It started Wednesday. A low fever that her school nurse flagged, Logan picking her up at noon to find her sitting in the clinic hallway with her backpack on her lap, flushed and martyred, declaring that she was fine and did not need to go home and had a presentation on weather patterns on Friday. You have 101 fever, Logan said. It's 1 degree. That's 1 degree past 100. I can do the presentation with a fever, Maisie said. Lots of important people gave speeches when they were sick. Name one. She thought about it. Abraham Lincoln, she said, with the confidence of someone who was not sure about this but was committing. He did not, Logan said. Come on. He took her home, installed her on the couch with her blanket and a glass of water, and called his office to rearrange his afternoon. The project meeting he'd been preparing for had to move. His client, a patient woman named Doris Chen, who was overseeing the Arts Center build, took it with good grace and rescheduled for the following morning. By Thursday, the fever had settled into a sinus thing. Better, but not good. Maisie was home again, demanding television and soup with the unsentimental authority of the convalescing. Logan worked at the kitchen table between errands, and by midday, he was behind on the Arts Center drawings in a way that was going to require him to stay up late or come in early for the next several days. Victoria came home at 6 to find the apartment in the specific state of organized chaos that Maisie's sick days produced. Blankets everywhere, the coffee table repurposed as a desk/meal tray/art station, a half-finished drawing of what might have been a sunset or a house fire on the floor by the couch. Sick day? Victoria said. Day 2, Logan said without looking up from his laptop. She's improving. She'll tell you she's fully recovered. She's not fully recovered. I'm fully recovered, Maisie announced from the couch. Your nose is running, Logan said. That's residual. Victoria set her bag down, looked at the drawing on the floor, looked at Maisie, and said, Move over. She sat on the couch, pulled a corner of the blanket over her own lap without ceremony, and Maisie immediately redistributed herself so that her head was on the armrest nearest Victoria, which was also her preferred position when Logan was sitting there. Logan watched this happen from the kitchen and made a decision not to think about what it meant. What are we watching? Victoria said. The nature one, Maisie said. About the ocean. The one with the anglerfish? Yeah. Maisie pulled the blanket up. They're disturbing. Deeply, Victoria agreed. Logan made soup. Saturday arrived dressed as a formal obligation. The big dinner, 12 people, Eleanor's full production, the kind of evening that required a babysitter and a pressed jacket, and the particular internal preparation Logan associated with things that mattered more than they were supposed to. He'd arranged for Sophie's mother, Gail, to take Maisie. Maisie was well enough, and the two girls were already planning what amounted to a counter-event that involved a movie and the negotiation of a very specific pizza order. Logan kissed Maisie's forehead at 5:30, told her to be reasonable about the pizza toppings, and got a look in return that suggested she found this advice offensive. Victoria was ready when he came out of his room. She was wearing the dark green again. Not the same dress, a different cut, but the same color, and Logan decided that whoever had told her dark green was her color had done her a genuine service. She looked at him. He was in his dark jacket, the same one as the first dinner, because he owned 2 suits, and this one was better. "You could have worn the other one," she said. "It's the same event. It's a different dinner. Nobody's going to remember what I wore to the first dinner." "Marcus will," she said. Logan straightened his cuff. "Then it's extremely deliberate." Something shifted in her expression, amusement and something underneath it. "Ready?" she said. "Yeah." In the car, she told him what to expect. 12 guests, including an industry colleague of her father's, a cousin named Patrick, who asked loud questions, Eleanor's friend Margaret, who had opinions about everything, and Marcus, who had apparently confirmed attendance on Thursday in a move that no one had explicitly invited him to, but no one had stopped either, because Eleanor's relationship to Marcus involved a particular form of polite intractability. "He's going to do something tonight," Victoria said. "What makes you say that?" "He called again, yesterday." She looked out the window. "I didn't pick up, but he left a message. He said he was looking forward to the dinner and that he hoped we could talk, the 3 of us, about, he said, the fuller picture, whatever that means." "It means he's going to try to use the Meridian offer," Logan said, "in front of my family." "Possibly." Victoria was quiet. Logan, I'm not afraid of him. I want to be clear about that." "I know. I just want tonight to be—" She stopped. "I'm tired of every room with my family in it feeling like a negotiation." "Then let's change what the negotiation's about," Logan said. She looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means walk in like you belong there. Because you do." He glanced at her. "You always have. That's actually the whole problem. They can't figure out what to do with someone who belongs somewhere as completely as you belong everywhere you go." She didn't say anything for a moment. Outside, the suburbs were beginning to gather at the edges of the highway. "You're going to make me redo my face," she said finally. "You're fine. I'm not crying. I'm just—" "Victoria." "I'm fine," she said firmly. "Drive." The house was fully lit when they arrived, the kind of lighting that came from every window and made the building look like it was performing. Logan parked, and they walked up together, and he did not reach for her hand, and she did not reach for his. And somewhere in the 3 seconds before the front door opened, that distance, that 3 inches of not quite touching, felt like the loudest thing. Then the door opened, and Eleanor was there, and the evening began. It was louder than the first dinner. 12 people in a formal dining room produces a particular acoustic environment. The overlap of conversation, the movement of chairs, the way sound collects in the corners of high-ceilinged rooms. Logan moved through the introductions with the quiet attentiveness he brought to new spaces, reading the room the way he read a building's bones before he ever touched a drawing. Patrick, the cousin, was exactly as advertised, large, friendly, immediately curious about Logan's work, asking the kind of questions that were actually interested and not strategic, which made him immediately the easiest person in the room. Eleanor's friend Margaret assessed Logan from across the appetizers with the frank appraisal of a woman who had watched many people enter this family's orbit and had opinions about most of them. Marcus was by the window again. Different suit, same posture. He crossed to them within 4 minutes of their arrival, which Logan noted as a choice. "Victoria," he said. "Logan." He shook Logan's hand with the grip of a man reminding you he went to the gym. "Good to see you again." "Marcus," Logan said. "How's business?" "Productive." Marcus looked at Victoria. "You look well." "I am well," Victoria said with the specific warmth of a woman who has decided to be entirely pleasant and mean it as a wall. "I was hoping we'd get a chance to talk tonight," Marcus said. "The 3 of us, at some point." He said the 3 of us with the ease of a man who had practiced including Logan just enough to seem generous about it. "I've been thinking a lot about the Meridian conversation." "Tonight probably isn't the right context for that," Victoria said. "Of course," Marcus said. "Of course, no, you're right." He smiled. "Let's just enjoy the evening." He drifted back toward the window. Logan watched him go. 4 minutes, Logan said quietly. "I clocked 3.5, Victoria murmured. "Either way, he's not pacing himself." "No," she agreed. He's not. Dinner was served at a long oval table with Eleanor at one end and Richard at the other. Logan was placed across from Patrick, which he suspected Richard had arranged deliberately as a form of protection. Patrick's friendly questions created a buffer that made Marcus's position at the far end of the table less strategically useful. The first hour went well, in the specific way that formal dinners go well when the food is good and the wine is moving and no one has yet said the thing they've been building toward. Logan talked with Patrick about a renovation project Patrick was considering, answered Margaret's pointed questions about his firm with enough specificity that she stopped finding angles in them, and watched Victoria across the table handle 3 simultaneous conversations with the efficiency of someone who had been navigating rooms like this her whole life. She was good at it. He'd always known that. But watching it now, from inside it rather than beside it, he saw the specific toll it took. The way her shoulders carried a fraction of extra tension that wasn't visible unless you knew to look. The way she monitored the table with a peripheral attention that never quite stopped. Marcus moved at dessert. He did it well. Logan gave him that. He waited until the main course plates had been cleared and the conversation had naturally opened into the looser, branching talk of a table that had eaten and was settling. He raised his glass in a way that was not quite a toast, but gathered attention without commanding it, and said, I wanted to take a moment. I know this isn't the context, but I think the people in this room should hear it, because you're the people who matter to Victoria. He looked at her directly. I've been in conversations with the Meridian Group. I know about the offer they've made, and I think it's extraordinary. I think it represents something Victoria has built that has outgrown what any single person can manage alone. The table went quiet, in the way tables go quiet, when something has just changed the temperature of the room. The partnership they're proposing, Marcus continued, isn't a concession. It's a recognition. He paused. But it requires a certain kind of clarity about priorities, about what we're building and why, and I hope that's a conversation Victoria feels supported to have. He said supported in a way that implied she currently wasn't. That implication landed in the room like something dropped. Victoria set her dessert fork down. She didn't look rattled. She looked, if anything, very still. The stillness before precision. Logan recognized it from the first dinner, from Tuesday night on the couch, from a dozen moments when she decided how to handle something and made it look effortless when it was anything but. Marcus, she said, I appreciate the thought. I do. She looked around the table, not performing, just including. But I think I should be honest, since we're being honest. She set her hands flat on the table. I turned down a version of this conversation 18 months ago. Not the Meridian offer specifically, but the underlying argument that what I've built needs to move beyond me to be worth anything. She paused. I've heard that case made by very smart people who I respect, and it's not wrong, on its own terms. She looked directly at Marcus. What it gets wrong, she said, is the assumption about what I want. The assumption that the next stage of this company's growth is the most important variable. She was quiet for a second. It's not. What I want is a life I can actually live in. That's what I've been working toward, not the version other people think I should be building toward. The table was still. I know what that looks like from the outside, she said. It looks like leaving money on the table. It looks like fear of scale. I've heard those arguments. She glanced at Logan, briefly, something specific in it that wasn't for the room. But I've been paying more attention lately to what I actually want, and I have a clearer answer to that question than I've had in a while. Marcus started to say something. A recovery. A reframe. Logan could see him building it. Marcus. Richard's voice came from the end of the table, even and final. I think Victoria's said what she needed to say. Marcus closed his mouth, and something broke. Not dramatically. Not the way breakage looks on a screen. Just the quiet, permanent way that certain tensions resolve when someone finally names what everyone else has been managing around. The dinner continued. People picked up their forks. Patrick asked Logan something about load-bearing walls, and Logan answered it, and the conversation moved, and Eleanor poured more wine, and Marcus spent the rest of the evening being pleasant and contained and visibly recalibrating. But Victoria didn't look at Marcus again. Not once. And Logan noticed that too. They said their goodbyes at 10:15. Richard held Logan's arm briefly on the way out and said nothing, which said a great deal. Eleanor kissed Victoria on the cheek and then, unexpectedly, turned to Logan and did the same, which surprised him enough that he almost didn't respond in time. In the car, Victoria sat with her head back against the headrest. Not asleep, not speaking, just present. Logan started the drive back. After about 5 minutes, she said, "I meant it. I know. All of it, not just the meridian part." She was looking at the ceiling of the car. "The part about knowing what I want." Logan kept driving. "I've been thinking about something you said," she said. "Weeks ago, maybe? That the line between fear and vision is blurry, that both can be true at the same time." She turned her head to look at him. "I think that's right. About the company, and about other things." He didn't answer. Not because he didn't have one, but because there was a version of this moment that required not rushing, that required him to keep driving and let her find the rest of it herself. "Logan," she said. "Yeah." "When we get home," she said slowly, "I think we need to talk, actually talk." A pause. "I don't want to do it in the car." He nodded. "Okay." They drove the rest of the way in silence that was different from every silence before it. Not comfortable, not uncomfortable, but charged in the particular way of something that's been held back for a long time, and is now, finally, moving toward its own resolution. The rain started about 3 miles from home, slow at first, then steadier. By the time Logan parked, it was the kind of rain that blurs the lights and makes the world outside the car feel very far from where you're sitting. Victoria looked at the rain on the windshield for a moment. "Ready?" he said. "No," she said honestly, "but let's go." The rain was heavier by the time they got upstairs. Logan unlocked the apartment door, and they came in out of the wet. Not soaked, just that particular kind of damp that rain leaves on your shoulders and in your hair when you've walked quickly from a car to a building and weren't quite fast enough. Victoria dropped her bag on the hook by the door. Logan shrugged out of his jacket and hung it over the back of a chair to dry. The apartment was quiet and dark, except for the lamp Maisie always left on in the hallway when she stayed at Sophie's, a habit she'd developed at 5 and never outgrown, as if the light meant someone was still home. He went to the kitchen and filled the kettle without asking. Victoria sat at the kitchen table. Not the couch, the table, which meant she wanted to be upright for this, and looked at her hands. The rain moved against the windows in waves, the way it does in a city when the wind is working with it. Logan set 2 cups on the counter. He didn't rush. "You want to go first," he said, "or you want me to?" Victoria looked up. "I don't know what you would say," she said, "if you went first." "I think you do." She was quiet for a moment. The kettle began its low build toward boiling. "I've been trying to figure out," she said, "when it changed for me. I keep going back through it like it's a document I can annotate, trying to find the exact line." She looked at him. "I can't find it. It didn't happen at one moment. It was 100 small moments, and I kept not naming them because naming them meant changing something that was working." "I know," Logan said. "I was afraid to break it," she said. "What we had, what we have, because whatever this apartment is, whatever we are to each other in the daily version, it's the thing I come home to. It's the thing that makes the rest of it manageable." She pressed her palms flat on the table. "And I thought if I said anything, or if you said anything, and it went wrong, I'd lose the whole thing. Not just the other part. All of it. You, Maisie, the eggs on Tuesday morning, all of it." The kettle clicked off. Logan poured the water and brought both cups to the table and sat down across from her, not at the far end, right across, close enough that the conversation didn't have to be louder than it needed to be. "I've been doing the same thing," he said. She looked at him. "Same math," he said. "Same fear. Whatever I felt, I put it somewhere and kept putting things on top of it because the alternative was risking the thing that was already real." He wrapped his hands around the cup. "You asked me once about Julia, about who I was after." He paused. "The version of me that came out the other side of that. He was careful, really careful, about what he let himself want, because wanting something and losing it, it doesn't just hurt. It changes the shape of you, and I didn't want to be changed again." "Logan, I'm not finished." He said it quietly. I'm not saying that to make you responsible for my history. I'm saying it because I need you to know that it wasn't ever about whether you were worth it. It was about whether I could trust myself to be a fair version of a person who wanted something that mattered. Victoria was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen from her in quite this form. Not the controlled directness she used in every other situation, but something rawer than that. Something that looked like it had been maintained at some cost and was now, finally, not being maintained. "And now?" she said. "Now I think I've been using caution as an excuse," he said, "and I don't want to do that anymore." The rain pushed against the windows. Neither of them moved. "I'm not—" Victoria stopped, started again. "I'm not good at this part," she said. "The part where you say what you actually feel out loud to someone's face. I'm better at infrastructure, plans, structures." She almost smiled, but it had an edge of something self-aware in it. "Feelings are not my strongest operational area." "You're doing fine." "I feel like I'm doing terribly." "Victoria." He leaned forward slightly. "Just say it." She looked at him, and for once she didn't calculate it, didn't find the most efficient route from the thought to the expression. She just said it. "I don't want to pretend anymore," she said. "I don't want to perform it for my mother or hold a position at a family dinner. I just—" Her voice was steadier than her expression. "I want it to be real. Whatever it is, I want it to be real." Logan sat with that for exactly as long as it took to be sure he wasn't going to say something he'd have to walk back. "Okay," he said. She blinked. "Okay?" "Yeah." "That's it? Just okay?" "What else do you want me to say?" She made a sound that was half exhale, half something she was trying to contain. "Something more than okay would be, I've been in love with you for somewhere around 14 months, Logan said. I've been managing it for most of that time with varying degrees of success. I think you knew before I admitted it to myself, and you were decent enough not to say so." He looked at her. "Is that more than okay?" She stared at him. 14 months, she said. "Approximately." "You've been carrying that for 14 months. I'm an architect. I'm good with load-bearing structures." She laughed. Actually laughed. The real one. The one she didn't use in business settings. And pressed the back of her hand against her mouth, and Logan thought that sound was probably one of his favorite sounds, and had been for a long time. "That's the most Logan thing you've ever said," she said. "I stand by it." She lowered her hand. The laughter faded back into something quieter and more fundamental. She looked at him across the kitchen table in their apartment, in the rain, with the hallway lamp still burning for the child who was sleeping at a friend's house, and she said, "I don't know how to do this. I want to be honest about that. I know how to run a company. I know how to have a plan. I don't know how to—" She gestured between them. "Be careful with something I can't control." "Neither do I," Logan said. "I know how to be a father and an architect. I know how to burn eggs and hang someone else's jacket on the right hook without thinking about it. The rest I'm figuring out in real time, same as you." "That's terrifying," she said. "Little bit," he agreed. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. Not the performed gesture from the doorway of her parents' house. Not the hand-holding of the thing they'd been pretending. This was smaller and less certain and entirely real. Her fingers were slightly cold. She didn't apologize for that. He turned his hand over. They sat like that for a while, with the rain on the windows and the tea going cold and nothing resolved exactly, nothing promised with the clean precision that Victoria would normally require of any agreement, but something true between them that hadn't been true out loud before tonight, and that felt to Logan more solid than any structure he'd ever designed. He went to her in this morning, not the night before, which was the right call, and both of them knew it without discussing it. They'd sat at the kitchen table until almost midnight, talking the way they hadn't let themselves talk before, without the management, without the navigation. She told him things about the company she hadn't told her board. He told her things about Julia he hadn't said to Rafe. It wasn't dramatic, it was just true, and that was its own kind of difficult. She'd gone to bed first, and at the door to her room she'd stopped and looked back at him with an expression that was a question and a decision at the same time. "Same time tomorrow," she said. And this time it didn't mean, "Are we okay?" "Same time," he said. And this time it meant yes. Maisie came home Sunday morning in the arms of a secret she immediately sensed was somehow located in the apartment but couldn't identify. She looked from Logan to Victoria and back again over her cereal bowl with the sharp, patient attention of a child who has learned that adults conceal things and that patience eventually reveals them. "You're both being weird," she announced. "We're not weird," Logan said. "You're smiling weird." "I'm just smiling." Victoria's smiling too. Victoria, to her credit, did not stop smiling. "Eat your cereal," she said. Maisie looked between them one more time and then, apparently deciding that whatever this was would reveal itself eventually, returned to her cereal and her book. Logan caught Victoria's eye over Maisie's head, and she shook her head slightly, still smiling, and looked back at her coffee. And that small, ordinary moment of shared amusement over a bowl of cereal, felt more like a beginning than anything that had happened the night before. They didn't announce it. There was nothing to announce exactly. No formal shift, no conversation that started with, "So we're doing this now." What happened was more gradual and more real than that. It was Logan reaching for Victoria's hand on a Tuesday evening and her letting him without looking up from what she was reading. It was her starting to tell him things at the end of the day the way you tell things to someone who's going to be there for the next part too, not just the current part. It was small and ongoing and imperfect, and occasionally they got it wrong in the particular ways that people who've been living adjacent to each other without touching always get it wrong at first. Miscalibrated, slightly too careful one day and not careful enough the next. Old habits pulling at the corners of new ones. 2 weeks in, Logan came home late from a client meeting that had run long and found Victoria at the kitchen table with a spreadsheet open and the expression she wore when she'd been working too long on something that wasn't resolving. He put his bag down, looked at the spreadsheet, looked at her, and said, "Close it." "I'm almost—" "Victoria." She looked up. "Close it," he said. "We're ordering food and watching something that doesn't require any thought. You can open it again tomorrow." She held his gaze for a second. "I was going to say I'm almost done." "I know. Close it anyway." She closed it, not without a brief expression that suggested she was noting the irony of taking instructions from someone who burned eggs with the regularity of a seasonal tradition. But she closed it. "What are we ordering?" she said. "Thai?" "From the place on Clement." "Obviously." She pushed the laptop aside. "Fine." She looked at him for a moment with that direct, unguarded look she was letting herself use more often now. "You had a long day." "Long day," he agreed. He sat down across from her. "The Chen project is going to go over on materials. I have to have a conversation with the client I'm not looking forward to." "Doris Chen? You know her?" "By reputation. She's reasonable. She doesn't like surprises, but she's reasonable." Victoria pulled her coffee mug toward her. "Be direct with her before she has to ask. She'll respect it." I know, I just—" He rubbed the back of his neck. "I hate that conversation. Every time. I hate telling someone the thing they love is going to cost more than what they planned for. Because you care if they're disappointed. Occupational hazard. It's not the occupation," she said. That's just you." He looked at her. She said it simply, without making it a bigger thing than it was, which was the specific way Victoria gave compliments that she actually meant. She didn't frame them, didn't build up to them. She just said them, the way she'd say something was true. "Order the food," she said. "I'll find something to watch." He ordered the food. She found something to watch, a documentary about a bridge construction project in Norway that she was interested in for structural reasons, and that he was interested in for her, which she pretended not to notice, but did. Bad. Eleanor called on a Thursday morning 4 weeks after the dinner. Logan was at the office when Victoria texted, "My mother called. She wants to have lunch. Just the two of us. She knows." He typed back, "What did she say?" "That she'd been watching us. That she wants to talk." A pause. She sounded, I don't know, not strategic, just like my mother. "Go to lunch," he wrote. "What if she, Victoria. Go." She went. She came back that evening quieter than usual, but not the closed kind of quiet. More like the quiet after something heavy has been put down. She came into the living room where Logan was helping Maisie with a science project that involved a disappointing amount of papier-mâché, and she stood in the doorway for a second, just taking in the scene. "How'd it go?" Logan said. "She apologized," Victoria said. Maisie looked up from the papier-mâché bowl. "Who apologized?" "My mom," Victoria said. Maisie considered this. "What did she do wrong?" "She tried to make decisions for me," Victoria said, "about things that were mine to decide." Maisie nodded seriously. "My friend Theo does that. He decides we're going to play kickball even when it's not his turn to decide. It's annoying." "It is," Victoria said. "Very annoying." "What'd you say? To your mom?" "I told her I appreciated it." Victoria came further into the room and looked at the papier-mâché. "What is this?" "A volcano," Maisie said. "Supposedly, it keeps going flat." "You need a steeper armature," Victoria said. "A what?" "The structure underneath. If the structure's wrong, the shape won't hold." She looked at Logan. "Do you have wire?" He got the wire from the supply drawer. Victoria sat down on the other side of the project, took the papier-mâché volcano apart, with the calm efficiency of someone deconstructing a failed structure she intended to fix, and began to rebuild the interior frame. Maisie watched with the focused attention she brought to anyone who knew how to do something she didn't. "My mother also said," Victoria said, working the wire, "that she liked you, specifically. She said you were honest in a way she didn't expect." She didn't look up. "She said she could see that I was different with you, more," she used the word settled, which from my mother is a significant compliment. "Settled like calm or settled like finished?" "Settled like landed," Victoria said, "like I'd found the place I was supposed to be and stopped looking." She glanced up at him. "Her words, not mine." "But you didn't correct her," Logan said. She held his gaze for a beat. "No," she said. "I didn't." Maisie looked between them again with the expression she'd been using for 4 weeks now, half suspicion, half a kind of dawning comprehension that she was waiting to confirm before she said anything about it. 7-year-olds, Logan had learned, were more patient than people gave them credit for when they thought the information was coming. He told Maisie on a Sunday morning, a week after Eleanor's lunch. He'd been going back and forth on the right way, and had eventually accepted that there wasn't a right way, only the honest way in the moment when it felt less wrong to say it than to keep not saying it. Victoria was in her room. Maisie was eating cereal. He sat down across from her, and she looked up and must have read something in his face because she put her spoon down without being asked. "What?" she said. "I want to tell you something," Logan said, "about Victoria and me." Maisie looked at him with Julia's eyes. "Okay," she said carefully. "Things are a little different now," he said. "Between us. She's still Victoria. She still lives here. Nothing about how we live is different." He paused. "But I care about her, more than just as a friend." Maisie was quiet for a moment. Then, "Like a girlfriend?" "Yeah, something like that." Another pause. Maisie picked up her spoon and then put it back down. "Does she know?" Logan almost smiled. "Yeah, buddy, she knows." "Okay." Maisie pulled at the edge of her placemat. "Does she still like me?" "Maisie." He reached across and touched her hand. "She came and rebuilt your volcano at 9 o'clock at night." "That's true," Maisie conceded. "Nothing about how she feels about you changed." Maisie was quiet for another moment. Then she said, "Is it weird?" "A little," Logan said, "but good weird." She thought about this with the seriousness she brought to things that mattered. Then she picked up her spoon. "Okay," she said. "Can I have more cereal?" "Yeah," Logan said. "You can have more cereal." The part that was hardest, and this he hadn't anticipated, was not the beginning of it, but the maintenance. It was learning each other in this different register after 3 years of knowing each other in the prior one. It was the moments when old habits and new ones collided, when Victoria's instinct was to manage a problem alone, and Logan's instinct was to let her, and both of those instincts were wrong now in ways they hadn't been before. It was a Wednesday evening, 5 weeks after the kitchen table conversation, when she came home with the expression that meant something had gone sideways and went directly to her room without stopping. Logan waited 20 minutes, then he knocked. "Yeah," she said. He opened the door. She was sitting on her bed with her laptop open and her jacket still on, which meant she'd gone from the car directly to this without stopping for breath. "What happened?" he said. "The Meridian Group withdrew the offer," she said. "They went to a competitor. They announced it today." She looked at her screen. "I said no, and I don't regret saying no, but they didn't wait. They moved, and they went somewhere else, and now there are people in my company who are going to read that announcement and wonder if I made the wrong call." Logan came into the room and sat on the edge of the bed. "Did you?" "No," she said immediately. Then, "I don't know. Maybe." She closed the laptop. "I chose the version of this company where I stay in control and build it my own way. That was the right choice. I believe that." She looked at him. "But believing you made the right choice doesn't protect you from the consequences of it." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." "I hate that," she said. "I know." She looked at him sideways. "And you're not going to tell me it's going to be fine." "It might be fine," he said. "I genuinely don't know. Your company might take a hit from this short term and recover, or it might not take a hit at all, or it might be a harder year than you were planning." He looked at her steadily. "I don't know which, but I know you made the decision that let you keep being the person you want to be, and I think that's going to matter more in 5 years than whatever the next quarter looks like." She was quiet for a moment. "You're very irritating," she said. "I know. You're almost always right, and it's irritating." "I'm not almost always right. You are about the things that matter." She leaned her head sideways briefly against his shoulder. It was a small gesture and lasted maybe 3 seconds, and she straightened back up before it fully registered. But it was there, that specific weight and warmth, and he felt it the way he felt things he didn't examine too directly. At the edge, in the part of him that kept inventory of things that mattered. "I should call my CFO," she said. "Probably. Before the announcement circulates." "Yeah." She didn't move for another minute. He didn't either. "Logan," she said. "Yeah." "Thank you for—" She stopped. "I don't know what I'm thanking you for specifically." "Being here," he said. "Yes," she said. "That." She got up and picked up her phone. He got up and went back to the kitchen. He started making dinner, something that required more steps than it needed to, the kind of cooking he did when he needed to do something with his hands while his head sorted through other things. He made pasta from scratch, which took 40 minutes and was not strictly necessary. And by the time it was done, Victoria had finished her calls and Maisie had done her homework, and the three of them ate at the kitchen table and talked about Maisie's upcoming class performance, and whether the volcano had adequately impressed her teacher, and what Maisie intended to do with her life, which she said was either veterinary science or professional drawing, and she wanted to know if those could be combined. "Animal illustrator," Victoria said. Maisie's eyes went wide. "That's a job?" "Absolutely." "How do you know that?" "I know a lot of things," Victoria said. Maisie looked at her father. "She does know a lot of things," she said, as if confirming a hypothesis. "She really does," Logan said. They did the dishes after, the three of them in the kitchen, Maisie on her step stool washing with the focused sincerity of someone taking the task seriously, Victoria drying, Logan putting things away in the places they had always been. The rain had come back, softer than before, running down the windows in the particular quiet way of late evening rain that isn't trying to make a point. The apartment was warm and a little loud and slightly disorganized in the way that homes get when the people in them are actually living in them. Logan put the last plate away and stood for a moment with his hand on the cabinet door, just listening to Maisie describing at length the specific qualities that would make a good animal illustration career, and Victoria asking questions that were actually interested, and the rain outside and all of it together in one space. He'd rebuilt his life once already. He knew the work of it, the particular patience required to find the structure inside the ruin and start laying new things on top of it. He knew it didn't happen in a moment. It happened the way buildings happened, incrementally, carefully, one true thing placed on top of another until the whole thing could hold its own weight. This felt like that. He closed the cabinet and turned back to the room, to the small domestic wreckage of a Tuesday night, and felt, without dramatics, without making a production of it, that he was standing somewhere he intended to stay. The year did not unfold the way anyone planned. But then, Logan had stopped expecting years to follow plans sometime around the age of 28, when the plan had been a life with Julia and a house in the neighborhood they'd been saving for, and a second child they'd talked about in the careful, hopeful way of people who believe the future is something you can sketch in advance. He'd learned, the hard way, and then slowly, that life didn't honor sketches. It honored what you showed up for. It honored what you kept choosing, quietly, in the ordinary moments when no one was watching and nothing dramatic was happening, and it was just you and the decision in front of you and whether you were willing to make it again. He thought about that a lot in the months that followed the kitchen table conversation. Not with grief, he was past the grief being the primary thing most days, but with the particular gratitude of someone who has come out the other side of something that could have gone worse and chosen not to examine it too hard in case the gratitude dissolved under scrutiny. The year had hard parts. Victoria's company took the short-term hit she'd predicted, not catastrophic, but real enough that she spent 3 weeks in a sustained state of controlled intensity that Logan recognized as her version of crisis management, which involved very long days and very little sleep, and a particular economy of personal conversation while the professional fires were being managed. He didn't push during those weeks. He left food. He kept the apartment quiet when Maisie was at school and the noise necessary, and warm when she was home. He let Victoria work, and he made sure she knew, not through speeches, not through declarations, but through the small, ongoing language of someone who was paying attention, that he was there. She came out of it. The company steadied. A partnership she'd been cultivating for 18 months with a logistics company out of Chicago came through in March and changed the numbers in a way that made the Meridian situation look, in retrospect, like the narrow escape it had always been. Her CFO sent Logan a bottle of wine as a joke, though the card said only "thank you for keeping her sane," and Logan put it on the counter and Victoria came home and looked at it and said, "Diane has no boundaries," and then opened it. "She's not wrong," Logan said. "She's occasionally right," Victoria said. "Don't tell her." Spring came in the way San Francisco springs do, without announcement, just a gradual warming that one day crossed some invisible threshold, and everything that had been gray and wet was suddenly clear and bright, and the city looked like it had been cleaned overnight by someone who cared about the work. Logan finished the Arts Center drawings in late February and broke ground in early April, and the first time he stood on the site in his hard hat and watched the excavation begin, he felt the specific deep satisfaction of seeing something you'd carried in your head for 2 years become a physical fact in the world. Maisie turned 8 in April. She had requested, with the precision of a child who had been planning for several months, a birthday party with exactly 7 friends, a specific flavor combination of cake that Logan had been assured was possible but had never personally attempted, and a backyard activity that she described as a treasure hunt with real clues, not easy ones. She had also requested that Victoria help design the clues on the grounds that Daddy makes them too obvious. "I made them appropriately challenging," Logan said. "Marcus found his in 3 seconds," Maisie said. "That's from 2 years ago. I still think about it." Marcus was 9 and very competitive. "He's still very competitive," Victoria said, not looking up from her laptop. "The clues should be harder." "Thank you," Maisie said. They threw the party on a Saturday. The apartment building had a shared courtyard that Logan had never seen used for anything except the building manager's irregular and unsuccessful attempts at gardening. But he'd gotten permission 3 weeks out and spent 2 evenings clearing it up and setting things to rights in a way that Rafe, who came to help, described as aggressively optimistic for a children's party. "It's her 8th birthday," Logan said. "She gets optimistic." "She's going to remember this," Rafe said, driving a stake into the ground for the banner. "That's the point." The party ran 4 hours and was, in the specific chaotic way of children's parties that involve competitive treasure hunting, an approximate disaster that Maisie declared the best day of her life. Victoria had made the clues genuinely difficult. One of them involved a cipher that only 2 of the 7 children solved, and one of those 2 was Maisie, who had apparently been given advance intelligence by proximity to the clue maker, a charge she denied strenuously. Eleanor and Richard came. This had been Victoria's idea, offered carefully. Only if you want, they don't have to. And Logan had said yes because it was true. Eleanor sat in a folding chair next to Logan's colleague Rafe and watched the chaos with an expression that started as composed and gradually became genuinely amused, particularly during the moment when Maisie's friend Theo attempted to climb the courtyard fence following a misreading of clue number 4. "She's extraordinary," Eleanor said, watching Maisie arbitrate a dispute between two of her friends with the seriousness of a small judge. "She really is," Logan said. "She's got your patience," Eleanor said. "And something else, something that's—" She paused. "She reminds me of Victoria, a little. At that age, the way she takes things seriously." Logan watched Maisie hand down her ruling on the dispute, which both parties apparently accepted as final. "They've spent a lot of time together," he said. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. She had a glass of lemonade she hadn't drunk much of. "I want you to know," she said, "that I understand now what I was doing, with Marcus. With the dinners." She didn't look at Logan, looked at the courtyard. "I was afraid she'd chosen the wrong thing again. I was trying to engineer a correction." She paused. "I was wrong." "You were looking out for her," Logan said, in a way that didn't respect her judgment. Eleanor finally looked at him. "She's made good choices. She's always made good choices. I just didn't always recognize them as mine would have been." A beat. "That's a distinction I should have made earlier." Logan didn't have a clean answer for that. He said, "She knows you love her." "Does she?" "Yeah," he said. "She knows." Eleanor nodded. She looked back at the courtyard where Maisie was now demonstrating to 3 of her friends the correct technique for reading a cipher, which appeared to involve a lot of pointing and no small amount of authority. "Good," Eleanor said. And that was enough. That. Richard found Logan later near the end, when the party had wound down into the last-hour looseness of children who have expended their energy and parents who are collecting their things. He didn't have a speech prepared, Logan could tell. He just stood next to him for a moment, watching Maisie say goodbye to her last friend, and said, "You're staying." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Logan said. Richard nodded. The way he nodded meant more than the nod. It was the nod of a man who had watched his daughter navigate 30 years of people who wanted something from her and had learned to recognize the difference. "Good," he said. Same word as Eleanor. Same weight. As if they'd been practicing. Marcus made one more attempt. Logan hadn't expected it to end cleanly. Men like Marcus didn't tend to close loops. They let them hang open as a form of optionality. And it came in June, through a mutual industry contact, an invitation to a professional dinner framed as networking that Victoria recognized immediately for what it was. She showed Logan the invitation on a Tuesday evening, her phone tilted toward him across the kitchen table. He read it. He handed it back. "What do you want to do?" "I want to ignore it," she said. "But the contact who forwarded it is legitimate, and I don't want to make an enemy of a useful relationship over Marcus Hale." "Then go to the dinner and be polite and give him nothing." She looked at him. "You're not concerned." "About Marcus?" He considered it genuinely, the way she'd want him to. "No. Should I be?" He's persistent." "He's persistent about the idea of you," Logan said. "That's different from actually knowing you. He doesn't know you." "I don't think he ever did." He looked at her steadily. "That's not me being territorial. That's just true." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're occasionally irritating in how well you understand things." "You've mentioned that." "It bears repeating." She went to the dinner. She came home at 9, shoes off at the door, bag dropped without ceremony. The particular looseness of someone who has handled a thing they expected to be annoying and found it less than that. "How was it?" Logan said. "Fine," she said. He was fine. He was professional. She poured herself a glass of water. He asked how you were. "What'd you say?" "I said you were well, that the art center was going well." She drank. He looked like a man who had just understood something he'd been refusing to understand. She set the glass down. I don't think he'll be a problem again. Logan nodded. I also told him, she said, that I was happy. That word specifically, because I don't think he thought I could be without his particular version of the future. She looked at Logan. I am, by the way. I know, he said. You always know, she said. It's very presumptuous. I pay attention. She crossed the kitchen to him, and he put his arms around her. Not a production of it, just the simple fact of it, the way it had become simple after months of not being simple at all. And she leaned into it for a moment, which she did sometimes now, without explaining it or making it mean more than it was, which was just what it was. Okay, she said, pulling back. I'm going to do an hour of work and then I'm done. It's 9:15. 1 hour. Victoria. 50 minutes. Fine, he said. 50 minutes. She went to her office and he went back to the section drawings he'd been working on, and the apartment was quiet and warm, and outside the June night was doing what June nights in the city do, holding the warmth of the day a little longer than expected, the way some things do when they've finally been given permission. The anniversary arrived on a Saturday. 1 year from the dinner, 1 year from the gravel driveway and the front door, and the moment Victoria had taken his hand and said, "This is Logan, my boyfriend," and the whole shape of his life had shifted without his permission. He'd been thinking about what to do with the day for a while. He wasn't a grand gesture person, as a rule. Rafe had told him once that his approach to romance was understated to the point of geological, which Logan had taken as accurate rather than critical. Grand gestures assumed a particular kind of audience. Victoria didn't need grand. Victoria needed real. He'd been working on something for 3 months. In the evenings, after Maisie was in bed and Victoria was finishing her last hour of work, he'd been in the small storage space off the building's back corridor, with tools and wood, and the particular focused quiet of someone making something from scratch that he intended to last. The bench had started as a sketch on a napkin in February. A balcony bench, something sized for the small outdoor space off the living room that they'd never quite furnished, that had remained for 3 years a place to put plants that didn't do well, and a folding chair neither of them used. He'd refined the sketch into real drawings over several evenings, chosen the wood from a lumberyard in the outer sunset, and built it in pieces, checking the joinery more times than strictly necessary because he didn't want it to be approximate. He wanted it to be right. It was white oak. Simple lines, a slight curve to the back that was both aesthetic and ergonomic, wide enough for 2 people to sit with room between them or without. He'd cut the corner detail with more care than the rest, because corners were where things either held or they didn't. He finished it the Thursday before the anniversary and carried it up to the balcony at 11 at night when Victoria was asleep, which took 3 trips because the main piece was awkward through the sliding door, and he put his elbow into the door frame on the second attempt and stood in the dark saying words he didn't want Maisie to hear until the pain passed. He'd gotten Maisie's help with one piece of it. She'd carved her initials into the underside of the right armrest, with a small V and a small L on either side of her own M, which had been her suggestion and which he'd accepted immediately. He put a drop cloth over it so it wouldn't be visible through the glass until he was ready. Saturday morning, Maisie made breakfast. This had been her idea, proposed to Logan on Thursday with the seriousness of a project proposal. I want to make breakfast for the anniversary because I can make eggs now, and I know how, and I want to do the whole thing. Logan had reviewed her capability with eggs, assessed the likely outcomes, and decided that the right answer was yes. She burned them slightly. Not badly. Caramelized, she said, with a look at her father that dared him to comment. Victoria ate them without complaint and said they were good, which Maisie received with the satisfaction of someone whose professional judgment had been validated. Dad always burns them too, Maisie said. It's genetic, Logan said. That's not how genes work, Maisie said. Almost 9-year-olds, Logan said, shouldn't correct adults at breakfast. I'm just saying what's true. Victoria looked at Logan over her coffee, and her eyes were doing the thing they did when she was amused and not going to show it completely, and he looked back at her and felt something that had no precise name. Something that was made of the accumulation of the year, all the parts of it, the hard weeks and the easy evenings and the Sundays, and the moments in the car and the rain on the windows and the kitchen table at midnight, and all of it threaded together into something that was theirs, specifically built out of the particular materials of who they were and what they'd managed to make of them. After breakfast, he brought her to the balcony. He stood behind her at the sliding door and put his hands over her eyes, which she tolerated with the patience of someone who was choosing patience, and slid the door open and walked her forward 3 steps and said, "Okay." She was quiet for a long moment. The bench was in the morning light, the white oak warm in the sun, the joinery clean and true. She stepped forward and put her hand on the back of it, the way you touch something to confirm it's real, and ran her fingers along the curve of the wood. "You made this," she said. "Yeah." "When?" 3 months, evenings." She turned and looked at him. Her expression was the unguarded one, not the professional Victoria, not the managed Victoria, just her. The version he'd been allowed to see more of this year, and intended, if he had anything to do with it, to keep seeing. "Logan," she said. "Look at the underside of the right armrest," he said. She crouched down and looked, came back up. Her face had changed in a small way that he recognized as the change that happens when someone has been moved and is deciding whether to hide it or not. She decided not to. "She's terrible at keeping secrets," Victoria said. "She kept this one for a week," Logan said. "That's the longest she's ever managed." Victoria stood and looked at the bench and looked at him and then sat down on it, testing the weight, setting her hands on the armrests. The wood held. It was going to hold for a long time. He'd built it that way. Built it to last. "Sit down," she said. He sat beside her. The bench was wide enough. The morning was clear, the city below still waking up, the sound of it rising in the mild, unhurried way of Saturday. They sat for a moment without speaking, which was a thing they'd gotten good at over the year. The specific comfort of silence between people who don't need to fill it. "A year," she said. "Yeah." "One dinner," she said. "That's what you agreed to." "I know." "You were extremely underprepared." Looking back, he said, "Yes." She leaned her head against his shoulder. Not briefly, the way she'd done at the beginning, just rested it there, easy and comfortable, and without the weight of what it had meant in those earlier months, when every small touch was still carrying more than it could hold. "I want to ask you something," she said. "Okay." She lifted her head and turned to look at him directly, with the quality of attention she brought to things that mattered. "I've been thinking about the apartment," she said. "What about it?" "The lease is up in September." She held his gaze. "I've been thinking about whether it makes sense to stay in it, or whether we should find something bigger." She paused. "Something that isn't the place we were roommates first. Something that's ours from the beginning." Logan looked at her. "You want to find a new place?" "I want to find a place that has enough room for Maisie to have a real bedroom, not the second room off the hallway. And an actual workspace, because working at the kitchen table is fine, but not forever." She paused. "And a proper balcony." "We have a balcony." "We have a ledge." She glanced at the bench. "A proper one." Logan was quiet for a moment. He thought about the apartment, the 3 years before everything changed and the year after, and all of it layered together in the rooms and the hallway and the kitchen where he'd burned eggs more times than he could count. He thought about leaving it and what that would mean and whether it would feel like loss. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like the right kind of next thing. "Okay, he said. "Okay as in you'll think about it, or okay as in yes?" "Okay as in yes," he said. "We'll find something. With a proper balcony and a real room for Maisie and space for you to work." He looked at her. "We'll bring the bench." She smiled. "Obviously we bring the bench." Maisie appeared at the sliding door in her pajamas with her hair doing something geometrically improbable and her cereal bowl in her hand. She looked at them on the bench. She looked at the bench itself. She looked at the initials visible on the underside of the armrest from where she stood. "I kept it secret for a whole week," she announced. "You did great," Logan said. "It was really hard." She came out onto the balcony and sat on the floor in front of the bench, cross-legged, because there wasn't room on the bench and she didn't ask for room. She just positioned herself as part of the configuration and ate her cereal. "What are we doing today?" "I thought we'd go to the park," Logan said. "The one by the water." "Can we get food after?" "Yeah." "The noodle place?" "If that's what you want." Maisie considered this with the thoroughness of a small person who takes recreational planning seriously. Okay, she said, that's what I want. Victoria put her hand over Logan's on the armrest. He turned his hand over, same as he always did. She looked out at the city. This was the thing no one had told Logan when he'd been putting himself back together after Julia. And maybe it couldn't have been told. Maybe it was the kind of thing you could only know from the inside. That the life you rebuild after the one you planned doesn't have to be a consolation. It doesn't have to be the reduced version of the thing you lost. It can be something entirely its own, built differently, from different materials, by a different version of you. And if you pay attention and you're honest and you don't let the fear make all your decisions, it can be something you would not have traded. Not because the loss was worth it, the loss was never worth it, that math didn't work and he'd stopped trying to make it, but because what came after was real and good and entirely its own kind of gift. He'd been given Maisie, who was eating cereal on a balcony in her pajamas, with her hair defeating gravity and her opinions fully formed, who had her mother's eyes and his stubbornness and something all her own that he hadn't been able to name yet and figured he'd spend the next decade finding words for. He'd been given the shape of a life that had surprised him into belonging to it. He'd been given Victoria, who ran a company and rebuilt volcanoes and ate toast standing over the sink and had, somewhere over the course of 3 years and one inadvisable dinner, become the person he turned toward without thinking, the way you turn toward light without deciding to. None of it had gone according to plan. None of it had been smooth or clean or unambiguous. There had been 14 months of managed distance and one very wet Saturday evening in a parked car and a kitchen table at midnight and more burned eggs than he could account for. There had been a year of building something real out of the materials of something that had started as pretend, which was, he thought, maybe not that different from how most real things got built. Not out of perfection, but out of the decision, made again and again in the small, ordinary moments, to keep going. On the balcony bench he'd made with his hands, with his daughter's initials carved into the wood, and the city waking up below them, and the morning light coming in clear, and without apology, Logan Mercer sat beside the woman he loved and listened to his daughter explain her noodle preferences with total conviction, and felt, not happiness as a wave, not the loud, sudden version, but the quiet, sustained kind, the kind that lives in the chest like something structural, something load-bearing, something built to last. He thought, this is it. This is the place. Not a place on a map. Not a specific address they'd find in September with the proper balcony and the real room for Maisie. But the place you find when you stop running the math on whether you deserve good things and just let them be true. Let them be yours. The city made its Saturday morning sounds. Maisie finished her cereal and started describing, with increasing enthusiasm, the precise route she intended to take through the park. Victoria listened and occasionally redirected and did not remove her hand from Logan's. He didn't move. He didn't want to. This, exactly this, was where all three of them belonged. Not because it had been planned, not because it had been easy, but because they had all, in their different ways, chosen it, kept choosing it, would choose it again tomorrow and the tomorrow after that, in the quiet, ongoing way that real things are chosen. Not once, but every day, in the small moments that accumulate into a life. And a life, Logan had learned, was exactly what this was.